Since 2012, a Quebec law has been punishing families who suffered a tragic loss to suicide or murder. Quebec's mandatory property seller's declaration forces those grieving, traumatized families when they sell their homes to answer, has there ever been a suicide or violent death in the immovable? So if your son commits suicide in your basement or if your wife is murdered in your bathroom, not only are you forced to deal with the shock of the event, but Quebec forces you to deteriorate the value of your home by disclosing the event, which has no structural bearing on the property. Quebec, with the law, recognizes the existence of ghosts, which in fact do not exist and never have. The law also opens the door to litigious hidden defect parasites to cash in on families who have suffered such a loss. It also incentivizes property owners to cover up any suicide or violent death in the home. If you can get away with it, you'd greatly gain if you pulled any fresh suicide or murder victim off of your property right onto the sidewalk. And in the US, vendors are not required to disclose suicide or murder cases on the property, except in California, where the question is limited to 3 previous years, or Alaska 1 year. 3 or 4 states have laws that specify that a vendor must answer truthfully if asked, and several states don't have any mention at all in the law. So thanks to Quebec's contrived law, bidders are literally taking advantage of another person's tragedy. One study from 2001 in Ohio suggested that homes would sell for 3% less when purchasers were informed of murders and suicides on the property. That 3% represents almost $20,000 on the sale of an average Montreal home, which goes for nearly $600,000 now. Prior to the law, Quebec's civil code never suggested that vendors be obliged to make any such revelations. Judges didn't interpret the code's spirit of good faith requirement to extend to offering a historical recollection of the people who lived previously on the property, as witnessed in the Knight versus Dion ruling. Deaths, suicides, and even murder in a home can't be considered factors that the vendor is obliged to reveal to the purchaser. Judge Gabrielle de Pocamandi ruled in 2006. But in 2011, a judge awarded $1,000 to 2 buyers who sought $7,000, which was a small claims court maximum, noting that the vendor's father-in-law had committed suicide on the property and they weren't made aware of it. The plaintiffs admitted that they didn't suffer any lost income or goods, but they said that they felt distress and anguish and had a hard time sleeping after learning of the suicide. Soon after, vendors were forced to fill out a form called Declarations of the Seller of the Immovable, which demands vendors reveal past murders and suicides that took place in the property. It didn't take long for the first case to roll in. A Quebec couple purchased a home on October 19, 2012 for $275,000. They knew that a murder-suicide had taken place on the property, but they were led to believe that it took place in the garage and not the basement. Neighbors set the purchasers straight about the slightly different location. The purchasers suddenly didn't want the property, and a judge awarded them a full refund and ordered the vendor to pay the plaintiffs $38,000. Once again, Quebec is the only province with a stigmatized property law. It's almost certain that in the entire life of your old house, a slew of unpleasant things happened at the very spot where you sit now or where you eat your spaghetti. Should landlords also be required to inform tenants of unpleasant things that happened in their units? Anybody suffering angst about such things needs to know this. Ghosts don't exist. The disclosure law also contradicts the government's own policy, which suggests that suicides are private affairs, as the Quebec coroner insists that media never bring them to light. So the mandatory disclosure is a violation of that principle. These days, courts are jammed with hidden defect shakedowns, many entirely frivolous. For every case that goes to court, there are many more that were settled outside. Quebec needs to stop punishing victims and repeal the law as soon as possible.